Hello class, in this tutorial I'd like to show you how to build a basic CSS layout. This is going to be a responsive layout, but it's going to stop short of what's called the CSS Flexbox. We will get into that in the next couple weeks, but I did want to start you with a basic layout that you can use. It would be required for your next project, and it also is pretty customizable as you start to experiment with it, so you can adapt it and work with it for your layout for your sites. So let me show you the setup that I have here on the website. Again, I'm using the W3 Schools, but I'm going to show you what to focus on from that site because there's so much to it, obviously. So I've got my IMD 133 folder, and in that folder I created a new folder called CSS Layout. So instead of trying to continue to build on the existing website, I'd like to start this one from scratch. I think that helps when you are doing CSS Layout. And then I have one HTML file right here, and all it has in it is a heading that says basic CSS layout, like a title, and then it has a menu without links. I just type in the hashtag instead of the link, and that's just like a placeholder. So it says link 1, 2, 3, and 4. Not trying to create some kind of a brand or identity for this site right now. I'm just trying to incorporate a basic layout into the site that is responsive and looks good in the browser. So now let's go over here to the browser. This is what the site looks like so far. Not much to it, obviously. I'll probably get rid of that HR, make sure that everything is working correctly. So I'll save this, refresh it. Alright, and then on W3 Schools, what you want to do is click on Learn CSS on the left-hand side. And if you watched the previous tutorial, you saw that I took you through maybe 10 or 15 of these links on the left-hand side, showed you how to incorporate the internal style sheet in the head of your document with the style tag. So that's what the first tutorial showed you. Now what you want to do is, once you work through these and sort of incorporated some, try them out, try out the different styles and formatting, you want to begin to look at the layout of your page. That's really what it's all about, is how are you going to make your site look the way you want it to with the different blocks, the different areas and columns and headings, things like that. And there are a couple different options for you in this tutorial. And my job, I think, is kind of to show you, point you in the right direction and show you what do you want to focus on here. Now, the CSS box model, if you want to look at this and work through it, this is sort of like what I'd call the foundation for CSS design. When everyone first started to use CSS layout, probably, I don't know, 20 years ago it's been, I think. I mean, most people used tables at that time, but as CSS started to replace tables, this is what everyone used, this box model with the division tags. And this still works fine, but there are some better ways to do it. So you could look at this, but then the one that I want you to focus on here, if you scroll on down, you'll see a lot of the fonts and links and everything, and scroll down till you see the CSS website layout towards the bottom. This is what I want you to start with, and the way that I'm going to show you how to incorporate this is I'm going to pick and choose different areas and sort of build one from scratch here by copying and pasting different sections, but I'm not going to copy and paste the entire thing. So I think maybe that might help you a little bit in terms of building this from scratch. So what we're going to do here, if you go down to the bottom, let's see, look for the 3-column layout right here. So it says we will create a 3-column layout and change it to a 1-column layout on smaller screens. So scroll down and do try it yourself. Okay, so I'm going to click try it yourself right here. And this is what it looks like. Alright, and I'll kind of show you what the code does. When you take this and you drag it and you make it smaller, notice how it changes into 1 column. Notice how the nav bar at the top stretches and shrinks, and then the header remains centered. And what we will do here is, let's go ahead and rebuild this in the HTML that I have, but let's take out this text. We don't need that. Let's keep the menu the same, and let's just make it 2 columns, because that's typically, you probably don't need a site that has 3 columns to start out with. So let's just do 2 columns. So I'll pick and choose what I want here to save time. I'm going to copy and paste, but you could type this out if you want. So basically, the way that this works here is you're always going to have 2 parts to your design, your layout. One part is going to be the HTML that has a certain section to it. So let's take this first section here, the header. So if you have a header on your page, you have to have some CSS that tells it what to look like, and that's where the name header comes in. So that's the first part. The second part is going to be back up here in the CSS, look for something that says header. That's where you style your header. So that's the two-part system that you're always going to find as you're beginning to build your website. So the way that I would recommend troubleshooting, and you're going to have trouble with this, it always happens when you're beginning, is make sure that you have matching elements here, like you have the header in the CSS, and then you have the header in the HTML. So as long as you have those two elements, they work together, then you can start to build your page. So let's take these one at a time, and then you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. So let's look at the code at the top. There's a few things here that you do want to put in. There's something called a metadata, and that tells the browser what your site is going to look like and how to interpret the site. So I'm going to go ahead and take that code right here at the top, and I'll just copy it. And this goes up here in the head of your document. Okay, so I'm going to make some space here, put this up here at the top. Alright, so I do want to put the meta tags in. Anything that I'm talking about here that you don't quite understand, what I recommend is just look it up in W3 Schools, because these tutorials would get out of control in terms of length if I try to go into every single thing here. So just look it up and then send me your questions. Also, this probably goes without saying, but if you have questions about this, send me your zip file, and then I don't mind recording a specific video for you, just for you. It would be unlisted and I can send it to you with your questions. Alright, so let's start out here at the top. Now, with the style tag, there's a couple things that we want to go ahead and put on here. So we're going to take the style tag all the way down to this bracket right here. And then actually, let's go ahead and take the header as well. So take this first part, and then I'll put this in here and I'll show you what it does. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put this over here. Again, I'm still in the head of my document. I'm going to paste this in. So you're going to have a style tag in here. Also, notice that there are some comments, and you don't need to put those in there if you don't want to. You can take out, anytime you see like an asterisk on there, you can take that out if you want. You don't need that in there. That's a comment, just reference for you. Alright, you're going to see the style tag, the box sizing, border box. That helps the sizing of your elements stay the same by incorporating the padding and the margins into the actual sizes. And it's something you probably don't have to worry about, but if you don't have it on there, things might look a little bit large in places. There's also a margin equals 0, and that's for the body, so that everything goes over to the left side and the right side of your screen, of the browser screen, taking off the margin. What I would say is just experiment with anything you see a number, change the number around and experiment and see what it does. Alright, now we have the header declaration, and it has a dot before it, which means it's a class. That means that you're going to define it in the HTML. Okay, so they have the background color, the padding, which you probably know what padding is by now. It's going to create the space around your element. And then you also have a text align equals center for this. Alright, so that's part one. Now part two is the actual HTML. So if I scroll down here and I look at what they have, div class. So they have a division tag, and I mentioned division tags in the previous tutorial. They don't really do anything by themselves, but then when you have the class, that defines the specific area of the page that refers to the CSS. So I already have something on here for, it says basic CSS layout, so I want that to be defined as the header of my page and have these properties applied to it. So as I'm going through here, one thing I noticed here before I do that is that I forgot to close my style tag. So I have the style open right here. Before the head tag closes, I want to close the style tag, just like that. And now I want to go ahead and add in this formatting. I can leave the H1 on there for now, but I want to go ahead and do the division tag. So I want to do division tag, and because I'm using the dot and then a name like dot header, I'm using a class, so I would do division tag and then class equals, and then in quotes, whatever the name is. No period or anything like that, just whatever the name is. Alright, looks just like that. And again, this program tried to be smart and put in the closing tag, but I want that to be after the H1 tag, so it's sort of at the end. Looks just like that. Now do a file save, come back over here and refresh. And now you can see I have a little header area, little layout. So this is the beginning of the layout for my website. Now I can change the color of this. I could even put a background image in there, but just for this tutorial, this is as far as I want to go with it. You can see it is responsive because it takes up the entire screen. And now I'm ready for my navigation bar. Alright, so let's do the navigation bar next. And follow the exact same thing that I just did right now. We're going to use the navigation links code right here all the way down through the hover. So let me take this code here and then I'll tell you exactly what it does. So I'm going to copy this and put it over here. All of this is going in the style tag. Okay, I'm going to paste this in. So style the top nav links, that's what the comment says. So this is the navigation. They call it top nav. That's just a nav bar. You could change this if you wanted. You could just call it nav bar or something else, but that is what the navigation is. And it does give me like a float left, a display block, a color. This is all things you can experiment with and change around if you want to change the look of the nav bar. Now, if you look at the example here, notice over on the far right hand side, it's got a little rollover on it. This is the code that adds the rollover. It's called the A hover. I could take that out if I don't want the rollover, or I could change this color right here, change to a different hexadecimal color if I wanted, but that is the rollover. So I put this in here. Let's say that I want to leave it now. That's the first part of the nav bar. The second part would be the HTML. So if I go down here on the W3 Schools and I try to find something called top nav, here it is right now, and you can see that it's around the links. So on my HTML I already have the same thing. I have a little nav bar, but it doesn't have any style applied to it. So all I have to do now is apply the division tag with the class equals, and then in quotes, top nav, just like that. And then after all these links, I want to close the division tag, just like that. I don't know why it did that, but we want to close division tag. In some basic troubleshooting, I noticed that I've got my quotation marks outside of this greater than sign, and that's something that would cause it to not work at all. I know it's minor, but that's the kind of stuff that will cause you major problems. And then a couple other things here before I test this. These vertical bars here that I had been using in the beginning tutorials, you don't want to include those when they are part of a CSS block layout. They're not interpreted correctly and nobody uses them anyway. They were just sort of as a separation device. So take those out. And then one thing I noticed that I think I just forgot to put in here, I'm just noticing it now, is at the very top I have style the top links, but I forgot to put the navigation bar itself, which is basically just going to be the background color. So let me go ahead and add that in right below the header, but right above the other navigation. Okay, it looks just like that, and that's the background color. Alright, so now let's see if it works. So I'll do a file save, come over here and refresh. Alright, and now we're looking at like we have a pretty good layout. At this point, if you wanted to experiment with sizes and colors, you could do that. So sometimes they'll use a shortened hexadecimal value right here, but for the nav bar, if I wanted to just try to change the color, so let's say I add in 3 nines before that and see what that does. So that changes the color. Maybe I want to experiment with the size of the nav bar, so that's done with the padding right here. So let's change that to 24 and 26. And again, file save, refresh. So that creates a nav bar that's way too big in terms of style, so I'll just undo that. But you get the idea of what you can do to customize this as you are learning. Okay, we have one more thing to add in, and that's going to be the columns, and we're just going to do 2 columns instead of 3, and then we do have to add in a little bit of code to make it responsive as well. So if you look at the 3 equal columns right next to each other right here, we can use this code because you can apply as many columns as you want using this and change around the percentages. So obviously if they're doing 3 columns, they're using 33.33%. We'll use this code, but just change it to 50% since we're doing 2. Obviously if you had 4 columns, you'd do 25%, so you get the idea. And we're going to take the rest of this code and put that in. Okay, so I'm going to highlight all of this right here and then we'll go through it. So I'll copy this, over here again in the style of my document. I'm going to paste this in. So here is what I just put into my document, and that's the first part. The second part would be the HTML. So now let me come down here, and you can see that they have 3 columns in here. They're all named column. It's not like column 1, 2, or 3. They all take the same CSS, and I'm going to get 2 of them. Alright, so I will do these 2 right here. We're going to use the division class row and scroll down. We'll have to add in one more closing tag. So I'm going to copy and scroll down here. After my menu, I'm going to put the HTML just like this. And then I do need to add in one closing division tag to make it even, because I have the row and then the column. And everything looks okay here. Let's go ahead and change the percentage to 50% for the width. Okay, so I'll just highlight this, change this to 50. And then one thing I just now noticed, I don't know why I did this, but if you look up at the very top where your style begins and you compare it to the W3 schools, you'll see your style tag right here. And then underneath that, you'll see an asterisk, which is a selector. I should not have deleted that. I was just going through it quickly and I thought that maybe it was a comment or something, but it's part of the selector for this border box style, which this is slightly outdated. It still works all right, but there are some better ways to do that. But as far as a beginning layout, this tag that I've highlighted right here, that's what you want, including the asterisk at the beginning, one space, and then you start with your bracket and the box sizing. So now I think I have everything. I actually think this is complete. I'll do a file save, and I'll come over here and refresh this. And now you can see that my layout is done. I have the header, the nav bar with some hover links on it, and 2 columns. Now check the responsive design part just by dragging your browser out. Notice that it's nice and responsive, and when I get low or small with the width under 600, notice that the columns stack. So that would be, if you looked at it on a phone, that's what it would look like. So you can adjust that. I'll show you the code that does that. If you scroll down to the end of your CSS, you'll see a column in here that says responsive layout. Makes the 3 columns, or 2 columns in this case, stack on top of each other instead of next to each other. So if I change this max width here to say 1000, and then I save this again. So again, that's responsive design code. That's about as simple as you can make responsive design. Refresh this. Notice that when I get here, instead of smaller, it actually puts it down. Now you wouldn't want to do that. It would put the columns on top of each other, but I'm just showing you that so you can see how it works. So that's a layout that can get you a long way, because you can start to add in images and change around styles and content and customize it. So this is what I'm going to be looking for the next project that's going to get you started on your basic responsive CSS layout.